3 people pulled me into a glass conference room at 8:45 on a Tuesday, and nobody would tell me why. HR slid a document across the table like it was something they didn't want to touch. A pen followed. My manager sat to my left, shoulders stiff. A lawyer from legal sat to my right, with his laptop already open, eyes fixed on the screen. "Just sign," the HR rep said. "No questions, no copies, it's standard." That was the moment I knew something ugly was happening, not because people get fired, companies do that every day, but because of the way they wanted my silence more than my agreement. I'm a quiet person by default. I build dashboards, not speeches. I'd spent 7 years at Northbridge Software turning messy revenue into forecasts executives could repeat in board meetings. I wasn't a star on LinkedIn. I was the person executives called solid, right before they asked for one more late-night revision. And lately, things had felt off. Brent had started having leadership syncs that I wasn't invited to. A new efficiency consultant had been hovering in meetings, asking pointed questions about who owned which models, who had admin rights, who approved what. Twice, I caught emails that looked like they were meant for someone else, threads about transition planning that stopped abruptly when I replied. Nobody explained. Everyone smiled. So when Brent wrote "quick touchpoint" on my calendar with no agenda, I assumed it was another annoying alignment meeting. Instead, I sat down and watched HR place my life into a stack of paper. "Your role is being eliminated," Brent said finally, like he'd been holding his breath since I walked in. I didn't react. In corporate rooms, the first person to show emotion is the first person who loses leverage. I read the title, "Separation Agreement and General Release." "Eliminated as of when?" I asked. "Today?" HR answered too fast. "Effective immediately." I kept my voice even. "Is this performance related?" Brent shook his head. "No, this isn't about performance." "Then what is it about?" He spread his hands in that helpless way managers do when they're choosing loyalty to the company over loyalty to you. "It's strategic." Strategic. The clean word they use when the real reason is messy. I flipped pages. Confidentiality, non-disparagement, a waiver of claims, then a line that tightened my stomach. I acknowledged I had received all compensation owed, including bonuses. Bonus season wasn't closed. Finance had already circulated preliminary multipliers to managers. In any normal world, I was owed money that had not yet been paid. I tapped the line. "Why is this in here?" "It's standard language," HR said, still smiling. I looked at the legal guy. "Can I take this home to review?" He didn't look up. HR answered for him. "We need it signed now, no copies. It's time sensitive. We'll send you a copy after." I stared at the document and felt something settle into place. Time creates questions. Copies create evidence. Silence prevents both. Brent finally met my eyes and I saw it. Relief. Not relief that I'd be okay. Relief that he didn't have to do the hard part anymore. I asked one more question. "Who decided this?" Brent's jaw tightened. "It came from above." "Above you?" He didn't answer, which was an answer. I read every clause like I was debugging code. The severance was modest, just enough to make a tired person walk away. The confidentiality clause was strict, the kind of language that protects reputations more than trade secrets. They wanted a clean story. They wanted me erased without noise. I set the paper down. "If I sign, what happens next?" HR's smile softened into something almost kind. "You'll return your laptop and badge. IT will disable access. Security will escort you to collect personal items." "Escort," I repeated. "Standard practice," she said. I glanced at Brent. "So that's it." He nodded once. "I'm sorry." He didn't sound sorry. He sounded finished. I held the pen for a long second without writing. In that pause, I pictured my team, people who trusted me to keep them away from executive games. I pictured the forecasting model I'd built over years, the one they relied on but barely understood. And I pictured someone else inheriting it with a smile and a fresh title. Then I signed. Not because I agreed with what they were doing, because I wanted to see what they would do after they had my signature. HR took the pages immediately, as if the ink might evaporate. Legal finally closed his laptop. Brent stood up too fast. "Thank you," HR said. "We'll walk you out." I let them lead me into the hallway. People at their desks kept typing, pretending not to watch. My badge still worked for the moment, but I already felt locked out. At my desk, I packed quietly. One notebook, a photo, a mug. Security stayed close, polite in the way people are when they're following instructions that make them uncomfortable. When IT took my laptop, the technician avoided my eyes. "I'm sorry," he muttered, already unplugging it like he was removing a life support line. I nodded. "I know." In the elevator, my phone buzzed. Slack logged me out. Email stopped refreshing. The silence arrived exactly when they promised it would. By the time I reached the parking lot, another buzz. Subject line: confirmation of separation agreement execution. Attached: a PDF copy of the agreement they wouldn't let me keep in the room. And beneath that, a calendar notification I shouldn't have been able to see at all. All hands. Team update. Scheduled for noon. That was when I understood the real reason for the rush. They weren't just removing me. They were about to introduce someone else. I sat in my car for a full minute before I turned the key. Not because I was crying. I wasn't. My eyes were dry. My hands were steady. I'd trained myself over the years to keep my face neutral, in rooms where power mattered. But my mind was running in tight circles around one sentence. No copies. It's standard. Then 2 minutes after I walked out, they emailed me the PDF. So it was never about policy. It was about timing. They needed my signature before I could talk to anyone. Before I could ask for advice, before I could compare notes, before I could realize what they were really doing. I saved the PDF. Then I forwarded it to another personal email. Then I downloaded it. I treated it like evidence because that's what it felt like. My phone buzzed again, and it was a text from Owen, one of my analysts and the closest thing I had to a work friend. "Are you okay? HR just put your calendar on hold." I stared at the message, jaw tight. They were already rearranging the office around the hole they'd created. I typed back, "I'm gone. Don't say anything in writing. I'll explain later." A second later, he replied, "What do you mean you're gone?" I didn't answer. Not because I didn't trust him, because I didn't trust the company. When you're dealing with a place that forces silence, you assume every system is listening. I drove home with the radio off, letting the quiet press against my ears. By the time I got to my apartment, I wasn't in shock anymore. Shock is soft. This was sharper. I put my keys on the counter and opened the agreement again, not reading it like a hurt employee, reading it like an analyst. Confidentiality, non-disparagement, release of claims. And again, that line about compensation and bonuses. It was tucked in like a small detail, the way companies hide poison in the fine print. I wasn't owed some fantasy number, but I was owed something real. Our bonus process was tied to the same metrics my team tracked. Finance had already confirmed we exceeded our retention target. I had an email from our finance partner a month earlier, saying my multiplier was higher than normal, because your team's forecast corrections prevented a material miss. I remembered it because I'd reread it the day I was tired and needed a reason not to quit. Now it felt like a trap. My phone rang. Unknown number. I let it go to voicemail. It rang again. Same number. I let it go. Then a third time. Same number. Finally, a new email appeared from HR. Short message. Professional tone. Please remember your obligations under the confidentiality and non-disparagement provisions of your agreement. A warning dressed as a reminder. I stared at it until my coffee turned cold. If I was truly irrelevant, they wouldn't be worried about what I said. They wouldn't be checking my silence like a security system. My phone buzzed with another message, this time from Raj in finance. He was the kind of guy who never gossiped, never panicked, and never texted during work hours unless something mattered. "Did you quit?" he wrote. I typed, "No. They terminated me this morning." 3 dots appeared, then disappeared, then appeared again. Finally, that's not what they're saying internally. I felt my stomach twist. What are they saying? I wrote. Raj replied, they told finance you chose to move on, and they're transitioning ownership. Also, there's a new employee record created today. Same cost center, same title. My thumb hovered. Name? His answer came fast. Caleb. The name landed heavy. I'd heard it in passing the way you hear names that belong to people above the rules. A friend of someone. A high-potential external hire. A guy who'd been floated around leadership conversations like a solution looking for a problem. And now my job had become his landing spot. I sat down at the kitchen table and tried to breathe through the irritation that was starting to boil into something else. Not rage, not yet. Something more controlled. Injustice with a clear shape. I opened my messages to Owen and typed carefully. They already have my replacement. If anyone asks, I didn't quit. I was terminated. He replied instantly, wait, replacement? They told us they're restructuring. They said your role was being eliminated. I wrote back, they said that to me too. Then how do they have a replacement? Exactly. I stared at the calendar notification still sitting on my phone. All hands team update. This wasn't a rumor. This was a plan. They fired me in the morning, then scheduled a meeting before lunch. The only reason to move that fast is to control the story, while people still believe you. At 11:45, Owen called. I answered and said immediately, don't put this on speaker. I'm alone, he whispered. They're setting up for the all hands. Brent looks weird. Who else is there? I asked. HR. And that consultant guy. The one who's been sitting in on meetings. The consultant. The one asking about access and ownership. The one I'd clocked as a moving part in something bigger. Owen said, people are asking where you are. They're telling everyone you had a great opportunity. A great opportunity. The corporate version of a body bag. The all hands began. Owen stayed on the call and kept his phone near the laptop so I could hear. Brent's voice filled my kitchen. Upbeat. Polished. The voice of a man performing confidence because he didn't have any. Thank you all for joining on short notice, he said. We have an exciting update for the revenue analytics function. Exciting. That word made my teeth clench. He introduced Caleb like a celebrity. Talked about his background, his leadership, his vision. Then he said the sentence I will never forget because of how cleanly it erased me. We're grateful for the work that got us here, Brent said, and we wish him the best in his next chapter. He didn't say my name. Someone asked, wait, what happened to him? There was a tiny pause. A rehearsed breath? Brent said, he decided to pursue other opportunities. Owen's whisper cut in over the line. People are looking around. This is messed up. Brent continued, Caleb will be taking over the forecasting model immediately. He's already been briefed. Briefed. I stared at the wall as the irritation turned into something colder. Brent did not understand that model. He understood the outputs, not the mechanics. Caleb didn't even know our data quirks yet, and they were handing him the steering wheel because the company was more interested in optics than accuracy. Then Brent said casually, like it was a minor detail, and Caleb will also be owning the board deck metrics going forward. My board deck metrics. The numbers leadership used to justify decisions. The numbers they would now get wrong. Owen muted his laptop and hissed, I can't believe they did this. I didn't respond for a moment. I was listening to my own thoughts click into place. Because here was the truth. They forced me to sign in silence because they needed to move fast. They moved fast because they were hiding a swap. And they hid the swap because it wasn't defensible. They hadn't eliminated my role. They had eliminated me. And the moment they introduced my replacement, they created the one thing they were trying to avoid. A timeline. A paper trail. A contradiction. Owen whispered, what are you going to do? I looked down at the separation agreement on my phone, at that line about compensation, and at the HR email reminding me to stay quiet. Then I said very calmly, I'm going to make them regret the silence. And then, as if the universe wanted to underline it, another message came in from Raj in finance. Forecast variance just popped. Caleb changed assumptions. CFO is asking questions. I read it twice. I didn't smile. Not yet, but I felt the first small shift inside me. The moment the power balance starts to move. Because I didn't know it yet. But that decision they made in the morning, the rush, the silence, the lie, had built a trap they were going to step into with both feet. I didn't sleep much that night, not because I was spiraling, but because my brain wouldn't stop doing what it always did, looking for patterns, predicting outcomes, running scenarios. By 6 a.m, I was at my desk with a notebook open, writing the timeline like it was a case study. Tuesday, 8:45. Conference room separation agreement. No copies. Immediate signature. 9:30. Escorted out. Access disabled. Noon. All hands. Replacement introduced. Story rewritten. They had tried to remove me quickly enough that the truth couldn't catch up, but the truth doesn't need speed. It needs documentation. At 9:07, my phone buzzed with another unknown number. I let it ring. A minute later, an email arrived from HR subject line. Return of materials confirmation. Short, clean, almost cheerful. Then the last line, the one that wasn't necessary unless it was meant as pressure. Please remember your obligation under confidentiality and non-disparagement. It wasn't a reminder, it was a leash. I stared at it and felt something in me settle. Not anger, something firmer. A line? If they were trying this hard to keep me quiet, it meant they believed I could hurt them. And I realized something I should have realized years earlier. I had been powerful in that building, not because of my title, because of what I held together. Forecasting, renewal risk, retention indicators, the model that fed the board deck, the logic behind numbers that executives use to justify budgets and promotions. They didn't fire me because I was useless. They fired me because I was inconvenient. My phone buzzed again. This time it was Brent. His name on my screen made my stomach tighten, but not with sadness, with disgust. I let it go to voicemail. He called again immediately. I let that go too. Then he sent a text, like we were friends, and this was a misunderstanding. Hey, can we talk? I think there's some confusion, just us. Confusion. They always call it confusion when the story they invented starts to wobble. I didn't respond. I wasn't going to give him a sentence he could twist. If I spoke now, I wanted it in a format that didn't forget. I opened a folder on my personal drive labeled Northbridge, where I kept my professional records. Not proprietary code, not customer data, the things any careful adult keeps. Performance reviews, achievement summaries, emails praising deliverables, notes on agreements, and there it was. A month-old email from Raj in finance. Subject, prelim, bonus, multipliers. In the body, Raj wrote that my multiplier was above standard, due to retention performance, and he included a line that made my throat tighten now. Your model correction prevented a material variance in the board outlook. Material variance, their words, not mine. I saved the email as a PDF. Then I saved it again in a different folder. Then I printed it, because paper has a way of making conversations less slippery. Then I dug deeper. The odd thread I'd seen weeks ago by accident, the one that looked like it wasn't meant for me. I searched for the word transition, then restructure, then finally, the name, Caleb. The email thread popped up like a bruise you forgot you had until you press it. It was short, casual, worse than anything dramatic. A director above Brent wrote, "We need a leadership placement for Caleb. Analytics is workable. Keep it quiet. Keep it quiet." Another reply. "We can restructure the function and consolidate role ownership. He can own the board deck metrics." Own the board deck metrics. The exact phrase Brent used yesterday. That's when the story stopped being a firing and became what it really was. A pre-planned swap. They didn't just decide my role was redundant. They decided I was in the way. And they decided it early enough to coordinate language and timing. My hands didn't shake. My throat didn't close. I felt the kind of clarity that shows up when you finally stop making excuses for other people. I wasn't dealing with incompetence. I was dealing with intent. At 10 o'clock, Owen called. He sounded exhausted. "They're freaking out," he whispered. "CFO called an emergency review. Forecast numbers are off. Caleb is asking everyone how the model works." "How off?" I asked. Owen laughed once without humor. "Bad. Like, he changed the churn weighting and now retention looks artificially high. Sales is already using the numbers." That was the nightmare scenario. Not because they deserved pain, though they did, but because the people who would suffer first were my old team. Finance, sales, ops. Analysts trying to do their jobs, while leadership pretended everything was fine. Owen added, "Brent is blaming legacy complexity. He said the model was over-engineered. Of course he did. When someone breaks a machine, they don't understand. They blame the machine." I rubbed my forehead. "Is anyone documenting what's happening?" Owen paused. "What do you mean?" "I mean emails, meeting notes, anything in writing." He hesitated again, then said quietly, "The consultant is in every meeting. He keeps saying captured decisions." Captured decisions. They were building their own file, either to blame me or to protect themselves when the board asked why a critical function imploded right after a restructure. I looked at the printed email on my desk, the one that described my work as preventing a material variance. And I realized the moment I stopped being the hero. I had spent years saving people who would never save me back. I had smoothed over mistakes, repaired broken narratives, kept the numbers clean, even when leadership made dirty decisions. And now they were calling my work legacy complexity, while my replacement broke it in real time. That wasn't just insulting. It was dangerous. I opened the separation agreement again and read it like a lawyer would. They had forced me to sign quickly. They had denied a review period. They had demanded silence. They had written an acknowledgement that I had received all compensation owed, including bonus pay, despite having already calculated and confirmed that bonus. And they had immediately replaced my eliminated role with a named person who had been discussed in internal planning emails. If you lined those facts up, the story they told the company didn't just look ugly, it looked risky. I didn't want revenge that felt like drama. I wanted something that could survive scrutiny, something that didn't rely on rage or speeches. So I did the most practical thing I could do. I scheduled a consultation with an employment attorney. Not a billboard attorney, not someone who promises vengeance. I wanted someone who understood corporate agreements, severance language, wage claims, and how companies behave when they think nobody will challenge them. The attorney's assistant booked me for that afternoon. Until then, I kept doing what I could control. I wrote the facts. I saved the emails. I printed the threads. I wrote down the names, dates, and exact phrases. Because when a company tells you to stay quiet, it's not because you're wrong. It's because they're afraid you're right. At 3 o'clock, I sat across from the attorney, in a small office that smelled like paper and coffee. I handed him the printed emails, the separation agreement, and the timeline. He read in silence for a long time, eyes moving slowly over the lines. Then he looked up and asked one question that told me he understood immediately. "Did they tell you your role was eliminated, and then fill it right away?" "Yes," I said, "within hours." He nodded once. "And they rushed you to sign?" "Yes." He tapped the bonus clause with the back of his pen. "And this acknowledgement is not aligned with what finance told you." I didn't interrupt. I didn't oversell. I let the document speak. He leaned back. "Here's what we're going to do. You will not argue with Brent. You will not email HR emotionally. You will not post anything." I exhaled slowly. "Okay." "We will ask questions in writing," he continued. "Clean questions they can't answer without creating liability." "Like what?" He smiled slightly, not kindly, but professionally. "Confirmation of your earned bonus calculation. Confirmation of the rationale for requiring immediate signature without review. Confirmation of the timeline of role elimination and subsequent staffing decisions. I felt my chest loosen in a way it hadn't since Tuesday morning. Because it wasn't about revenge. It was about forcing reality back into the record. The attorney finished. If they did what it looks like they did, they'll want this quiet for a different reason. I looked down at the paper again. They had demanded silence from me to protect themselves. Now I was about to use their own paperwork to make them answer out loud. And as I left the attorney's office, my phone buzzed with a new voicemail notification. Brent again. This time I played it. His voice was too warm, too fast. Hey, listen, I think there's been a misunderstanding. There's really no need to involve attorneys. Let's just talk. I'm sure we can work something out. No need to involve attorneys. The phrase didn't sound like confidence. It sounded like fear. And that was the first real micro-catharsis I felt. Small, sharp satisfaction. Because it meant the truth had reached them. They thought firing me in silence would end the story. It had only started the part where they couldn't control the narrative anymore. 2 days after my attorneys sent the first letter, the company stopped pretending I didn't exist. Not publicly, not with an apology. With the only thing that matters in corporate life, a response from legal. It arrived at 9:12 in the morning from a generic address that screamed policy and distance. They wanted to resolve the matter amicably. They wanted to avoid misunderstanding. They wanted to confirm ongoing obligations under confidentiality. They did not want to answer the questions. My attorney read it once and said, "They're stalling." He drafted a second letter that was shorter, colder, and harder to ignore. It listed the facts in plain language. They required immediate signature without review. They refused to provide a copy at signing. They represented the role as eliminated. They introduced a replacement within hours. They included an acknowledgement of full compensation despite documented bonus calculation. Then it asked, again, for confirmation in writing. This time, there was a deadline. I didn't enjoy any of this. I want that to be clear. This wasn't a movie. My stomach still tightened every time I saw their logo. I still had flashes of the conference room, the pen sliding toward me, the way they wouldn't meet my eyes. But fear has an expiration date when you stop being alone. And I wasn't alone anymore. I had counsel. I had documents. And I had the one advantage they didn't understand. I knew how their systems worked. Not in a hacking way, in a corporate way, the way policies overlap, the way departments cover for each other, the way a rushed termination creates more paperwork than a clean one. While legal played delay games, the inside of the company started cracking. Owen and Raj kept me updated in small, careful messages. "The CFO is furious," Raj wrote one evening. "Forecast variance is a disaster. Board deck got pulled and rebuilt." Owen followed with, "Caleb asked me for the model documentation. He doesn't have it." Brent told him to simplify. Simplify. That word meant remove the parts you don't understand until the output looks comforting. In the middle of this, I received a text from a number I didn't recognize. It was short. "Hey, it's Caleb. Can we talk?" I stared at it for a long time. They fired me, replaced me, rewrote my exit, and now the replacement wanted guidance. I didn't hate Caleb personally. I didn't even know him. But I understood what he represented. He was the landing spot for someone else's favor. He was the person they needed to work quickly, so the swap looked strategic. If I helped him, I would be helping the lie. If I ignored him, my old team would suffer more chaos. I chose the third option. I replied with one sentence. "Please direct all communication through legal." Then I blocked the number. It wasn't cruelty. It was boundaries. Everything I said could be weaponized, and I wasn't going to hand them ammo. That same day, Brent called again. I let it go to voicemail. He left a message that sounded like a man smiling through panic. "Listen, I know things feel unfair, but we really want to make sure you're taken care of. I'm sure we can figure something out. Taken care of. the phrase people use when they're buying silence. My attorney told me not to respond. Let them talk to me. So I did. A week passed, then something happened inside the company that they couldn't fully control. Northbridge posted a memo to the entire corporate Slack channel about process improvements tied to the restructure. It was meant to calm people down. A nice-looking message about alignment, continuity, and leadership confidence. Owen messaged me immediately. They posted a memo, but it has a version history link. I felt my pulse shift. Version history is the closest thing corporate America has to a confession. You can delete a message, but you can't delete the earlier drafts people already saw. Owen didn't send me anything proprietary. He didn't send customer info. He sent me what any employee could see at the time. A screenshot of the draft language in the memo's history, because the document was shared publicly before they realized the link was visible. The screenshot showed an earlier version of the memo, with a sentence that made my stomach go cold. We are placing Caleb into revenue analytics leadership to strengthen board reporting. Placing, not hiring, not promoting. Placing. And beneath that, another line. Exit timing should be same day to reduce disruption. Same day, reduce disruption. The disruption being me having time to speak. Owen wrote, they deleted the memo and reposted a clean version, but too late. I didn't cheer. I just forwarded the screenshot to my attorney. He responded within minutes. This changes the leverage. That night, he drafted the third letter. It was calm and professional, but it hit like a hammer because it didn't accuse. It simply asked them to reconcile their story with their own drafts. It requested immediate payment of the earned bonus amount already calculated. A corrected neutral separation statement in writing confirming the exit was not performance-based. Confirmation that the company did not misrepresent role elimination to induce signature, and a formal assurance that the company would not characterize me as having resigned or chosen to move on in any internal or external reference. It wasn't revenge. It was containment. Because the damage of being erased isn't just emotional, it's professional. One false line in a reference check can rot your next opportunity before it begins. The company replied within 48 hours. This time, the email was not vague. They asked for a call. On the call, their attorney sounded measured, careful, the voice of someone trying to keep the company from saying anything that could become a problem later. Mr., he said, addressing my attorney, we want to resolve this without escalation. My attorney's tone was polite and dead simple. Then resolve it. The company's attorney offered an additional payment, framed as goodwill, in exchange for a reaffirmation of confidentiality. My attorney asked, where is the earned bonus? There was a pause, longer than it should have been. Then the company's attorney said, the bonus is under review. Under review. My attorney replied, finance confirmed the calculation in writing before termination. Another pause. And then the company's attorney made the mistake that cracked everything open. We have concerns about whether the results were attributable. My attorney cut in smoothly. Are you asserting in writing that you recalibrated his bonus after termination? Silence. That was the chaos moment, the one where the room changes temperature. Because if they said yes, they were admitting retaliation. If they said no, they had to pay. The company's attorney finally said, we're not prepared to discuss internal compensation methodology. My attorney said, then we will proceed with a formal wage claim and a request for the personnel file and supporting documents. And he ended the call, clean, no drama. When we filed the wage claim, it wasn't a lawsuit headline. It was a complaint with a clock attached. Deadlines, penalties, paperwork. Companies hate clocks they don't control. Inside Northbridge, the forecast crisis kept bleeding. Raj messaged me one morning. Board meeting is tense. CFO is blaming transition instability. Brent is sweating. Owen sent another. Caleb got moved off the model. Consultant is now auditing the function. Auditing. That means blame is being prepared. And then one Friday afternoon, an email arrived from legal with a new tone. Not friendly, not vague. Final. They agreed to pay the earned bonus amount in full. They also agreed to an additional settlement payment. They agreed to provide a neutral reference statement. They agreed to confirm in writing that my departure was due to organizational restructuring and not performance. In exchange, they wanted a general release reaffirmation, standard corporate cleanup. My attorney negotiated the language so it didn't trap me again. He made sure the settlement referenced the bonus as earned compensation. He made sure the neutral reference clause was explicit. Then he sent me the final document to sign. This time, I read it in my own home, with time, with counsel, and with a copy in my hands before my pen touched paper. When I signed, it didn't feel like surrender. It felt like closure. A few days later, the money hit my account. Not a jackpot, not a fantasy, but enough to confirm one thing. They had lied because the truth was expensive. And then I got the last update that made the ending fully satisfying. Owen called me late one evening and said quietly, "Brent's leaving." "Leaving how?" I asked. "They announced it as pursuing other opportunities." I almost laughed, but it came out as a slow exhale. Because that was the exact phrase he used to erase me. It wasn't public humiliation. It wasn't cinematic justice. It was corporate karma. Clean, quiet, and written in the same language they tried to use against me. And in that moment, I felt the second micro-catharsis hit, stronger than the first. They didn't lose because I shouted. They lost because they tried to force silence in a world that runs on documents, and documents don't forget. The deposit hit my account on a Monday morning. No confetti, no victory music, just a clean line in my banking app that proved something simple. When they realized the paperwork could hurt them, they suddenly remembered how to be fair. My attorney called an hour later. "Funds cleared. Reference language is signed. Their counsel confirmed they'll correct internal messaging. You're done." Done. The word felt strange, like a door closing without a slam. For weeks, my life had been a timeline of emails, clauses, and careful silence. Now it was just over. That afternoon, I got a final message from Alicia in HR. Not an apology, not even a human sentence. A PDF attachment titled Separation Confirmation. It stated in plain language that my employment ended due to organizational restructuring and not performance. It also stated they would provide a neutral reference confirming dates and title only, and would not characterize my departure as voluntary. That was all I wanted from them emotionally, the truth placed back where they tried to remove it. Because being erased doesn't just hurt your pride, it damages your future. One false line, one, he chose to move on, and you become a risk in someone else's hiring meeting. I printed the PDF and filed it with the rest of the documents, not out of paranoia, out of maturity, a lesson I paid for and intended to keep. Owen called later that night. "They're acting like nothing happened," he said quietly. "But people know. The whole floor knows." "Are you okay?" I asked him. Because I meant it. He let out a small laugh. "I'm fine. I'm just angry on your behalf." I was quiet for a second. Then I said, "Don't burn yourself for me. Protect your work. Protect your name." He paused. "They changed the forecasting process." "What do you mean?" "They put it under finance governance now. No more one person owning everything. They're forcing review cycles and documentation. The consultant is writing a playbook. HR added a rule about severance review periods." I leaned back in my chair and stared at the ceiling. So they didn't suddenly become ethical. They became cautious. They built guardrails because they realized what happens. When you weaponize a termination, you create liabilities you can't fully control. Owen added, "Caleb got moved to a different group. They're calling it better alignment." Better alignment. I almost smiled. Because that's what corporate karma looks like. Nobody admits fault. They just relocate the problem until the organization can breathe again. 2 weeks later, I started a new job, smaller company, less theater, They didn't call themselves a family. They didn't post motivational slogans about integrity while doing the opposite behind glass walls. My new manager handed me a laptop and said, "I want you to challenge assumptions. If something doesn't make sense, say it." That sentence felt like oxygen. On my first Friday, I walked out of the building at a normal hour. Sun still up, mind still quiet. And for the first time since that Tuesday morning, I realized my shoulders weren't tense. Later that night, I got one last update that made the ending complete. A former coworker sent me a screenshot of an internal announcement. Brent was pursuing other opportunities, the exact phrase he used to erase me. I stared at it for a long time, not because I was thrilled he was gone, but because it was perfect in a way I didn't expect. They didn't drag him. They didn't punish him publicly. They didn't give me a speech to watch. They simply removed him the same way he tried to remove me. Quietly, cleanly, with the company's favorite lie attached to it. And that was the point. I didn't need his humiliation. I needed accountability to exist somewhere in the record. I needed the money they owed, the truth restored, and my name protected from their narrative. They made me sign in silence because they wanted control. But the moment they announced my replacement hours later, they built the timeline that destroyed their control. The irony is, if they had treated me like a person, given me time to review, paid what was owed, told the truth, they would have saved themselves money and damage. Instead, they tried to erase me quickly. And in doing that, they created the one thing they couldn't outmaneuver: evidence. I never posted about it. I never called them out online. I never walked back into the building for a dramatic confrontation. I just let paperwork do what paperwork does. It doesn't raise its voice. It doesn't beg. It doesn't forget. So yes, 3 hours after they forced my signature, they introduced my replacement like I'd never existed. But after that, every department they trusted, finance, legal, the board, had to face the same question. If this was standard, why do they try so hard to keep it silent? And once that question exists inside a company, it doesn't disappear. It just moves upward until it lands on the people who thought they were untouchable.